Today, we are exposing 5 Australian supermarket bread brands that turned one of the most basic real foods on earth into ultra-processed junk that experts now link to weight gain, gut issues, and chronic disease risk. Stay with me to the end, because I will show you the old-school-style breads and one dead-simple label hack that let you keep eating bread without feeding the ultra-processed food machine that is making Australians sick. Our grandparents grew up on bread that was basically 4 things: flour, water, salt, yeast, or sourdough starter. Proper sourdough bakers will tell you real bread is literally flour, water, and salt, plus time. Dough was mixed, left to ferment slowly, shaped by hand, baked that morning, gone by night. But here is the part nobody talks about. Most of the sliced loaves in Coles and Woolworths today are cranked out in industrial factories, spiked with canola oil, gluten, soy flour, and multiple emulsifiers to stay soft for a week, made from flour that has to be mandatorily fortified with synthetic thiamine and folic acid by law, and fits squarely into the ultra-processed food category that researchers now link with higher rates of obesity, type 2 diabetes, and other chronic diseases. This is not nostalgia. It is a completely different class of product being sold under the same word: bread. So let us break down exactly how 5 of the biggest names turned real bread into something your great-grandparents would not recognize. Number 1, Tip Top Sunblessed, the soft white loaf that never dies. Let us start with the classic Tip Top Sunblessed white toast or soft white. Aussie wheat, no artificial colors, flavors, or preservatives, no added sugar. On the shelf, it looks harmless, even wholesome. A lot of us grew up on this exact blue and yellow bag. Now read the ingredients for Tip Top Sunblessed white toast: unbleached wheat flour, water, baker's yeast, vinegar, canola oil, iodized salt, wheat gluten, soy flour, emulsifiers 481 and 472E, and vitamins thiamine and folic acid. So what is actually going on here? Extra wheat gluten is added to strengthen the dough. Canola oil helps with softness and shelf life. Emulsifiers 481 and 472E, which are sodium stearoyl lactylate and diacetyl tartaric acid esters of mono and diglycerides, help the dough hold more gas, stop it going stale as fast, and give you that pillowy crumb day after day. Food Standards Australia-New Zealand also requires all non-organic wheat flour for bread to be fortified with thiamine, which is vitamin B1, and folic acid, so almost every mainstream loaf now doubles as a vitamin delivery vehicle. Fortification has real public health benefits, especially for preventing neural tube defects, but it also shows how far we have drifted from bread as food into bread as mass medication plus additives. Sensory test. Ever notice how Tip Top stays weirdly soft for days, then suddenly molds instead of just drying out like a crusty loaf? How you can squash a slice into a doughy ball that never really springs back? That is the emulsifiers and processing at work. Researchers looking at ultra-processed foods point out that many packaged sliced breads fall into the ultra-processed food category specifically because of these additives, modified starches, emulsifiers, and gums, even when the front says no artificial preservatives. And a major series in The Lancet recently linked high ultra-processed food intake, including factory breads, with increased risk of type 2 diabetes, heart disease, and other conditions. We are not saying Tip Top Sunblessed by itself gives you any disease, but building your daily diet on breads like this is nothing like the real, slow fermented loaves our grandparents ate. And if you think you have hacked the system by buying high-fiber white for the kids, number 2 is going to hurt. Number 2, Wonder White, high-fiber sandwich and smooth whole grain, kids' bread built in a lab. Wonder White high-fiber sandwich and Wonder Smooth whole grain are targeted straight at Australian families. The packaging boasts high in fibre, source of protein, no added sugar, helps kids meet their daily fibre needs, and our softest ever white bread. Perfect mum bread, right? Check the high-fibre sandwich ingredient list. Unbleached wheat flour, water, 6% fibre, which is wheat fibre, and modified tapioca starch, 1413, yeast, wheat gluten, vinegar, canola oil, iodized salt, soy flour, acacia gum, cultured wheat flour, vegetable emulsifiers 481, 471, and 472E, and vitamins, thiamine, and folic acid. The smooth whole grain version adds whole grain wheat, barley, and oat flours, more wheat fibre, and the same modified starch and emulsifiers. So how did they make white bread high fibre while keeping it softest ever? They did not simply use more wholemeal flour and long fermentation. They added fibre powders, modified starches and gums on top of standard white flour. Modified tapioca starch, 1413, is a chemically treated starch that gives extra softness and shelf life. Acacia gum is a soluble gum that adds fibre technically, but also changes texture. On the surface, the pitch is white bread kids love, with all the goodness of whole grain. Underneath it is more like standard factory white dough, plus industrial fibre additives and emulsifiers, so we can tick nutrition boxes without changing the basic product. Experts warning about Australia's health star system say this is exactly how ultra-processed brands game the label. They add fibre, vitamins or protein so the stars look good, while the underlying product remains chemically transformed and poor quality. So yes, your kid is getting more fibre on paper, but they are also eating emulsifiers linked by some studies to changes in gut bacteria and inflammation, highly refined starches that spike blood sugar faster, and the kind of ultra-processed product that big reviews have associated with higher chronic disease risk when it forms a large chunk of the diet. If you have ever felt smug putting Wonder White high fibre in the lunchbox, you are not alone. That is exactly what the marketing is designed to achieve. And if you thought jumping to sourdough got you back to old-school bread, number 3 is where a lot of Australians get quietly tricked. Number 3, Helga's traditional sourdough, artisan branding factory formula. Sourdough is having a moment in Australia. We have been told it is easier to digest, better for blood sugar, and more natural. So when you see Helga's traditional sourdough loaf on the shelf with craft-style packaging and rustic fonts, it feels like the safe upgrade. But the ingredients tell a very different story. Wheat flour, water, yeast, soy flour, 3% sourdough from fermented rye, canola oil, vinegar, iodized salt, wheat gluten, emulsifiers 481, 471, and 472E, cultured wheat flour, wheat semolina, and vitamins thiamine and folic acid. So this traditional sourdough is mostly regular wheat flour and commercial yeast, a tiny 3% sourdough component, plus the same canola oil, added gluten and emulsifiers we just saw in standard factory loaves. Proper sourdough bakers in Australia are blunt about this. Real sourdough dough is just flour, water and salt, fermented slowly with a natural starter, and contains no commercial yeast, no improvers and no emulsifiers. Helga's is sourdough-flavoured bread, a factory loaf with a spoonful of fermented rye and some branding on top. So why is this a problem? Because a lot of people with gut issues or blood sugar concerns deliberately switch to sourdough, thinking they are moving from ultra-processed bread back to something more like their grandparents ate. But with a formula like this, you are still getting industrial fats like canola oil, added gluten, multiple emulsifiers, and speed-fermented dough with commercial yeast, just with a bit of sourdough flavouring layered in. The bag suggests traditional crafted sourdough. The ingredient list quietly says standard industrial bread with a 3% sourdough accent. If you have ever wondered why supermarket sourdough does not feel as satisfying or as filling as a proper bakery loaf, this is why. And if you are thinking, at least the stuff baked in store is proper fresh bread, number 4 is the court case that blew that illusion apart. Number 4, freshly baked today bread that was baked months ago. For years, Australian shoppers walked past the in-store bakery at Coles and saw signs like baked today, sold today, and freshly baked in store. The smell of bread, the warmth of the ovens, it all screamed real bakery. Then the Australian Competition and Consumer Commission took Coles to federal court. The court found that many of these Cuisine Royale and Coles bakery products were actually partially baked and frozen off-site by suppliers, in some cases overseas, including Europe and Ireland, shipped to Australia, stored frozen for up to 6 months, then finished in store and sold as if they had been made from scratch that day. The Chief Justice said Coles's baked today and freshly baked in-store claims were false, misleading and deceptive because they implied the entire baking process happened that day in the store, using fresh dough. The ACCC's concern was simple. Shoppers were paying a premium and choosing Coles over local bakeries based on a story that was not true. Now, legally, Coles has been forced to change that marketing. But the broader pattern remains. A huge chunk of in-store baked bread in big chains is actually part of a global par-baked frozen supply chain. Dough, or part-baked loaves, can be produced in factories overseas, frozen for months, then browned off in store and sold under artisan or bakery banners. Is frozen bread automatically unhealthy? Not necessarily, but it does mean long, complex supply chains. Dough optimized for freezing and rebaking, which usually means more improvers and conditioners, and a fresh label that is more about perception than a local baker up at 3 in the morning. If you thought grabbing a crusty baked today stick from a supermarket put you back in old-school bread territory, the courts themselves have already shown how shaky that belief can be. And even when these loaves get a shiny health star, number 5 shows how that rating can hide the exact processing you are trying to avoid. Number 5. When the health star is hiding the ultra-processed reality, open the bread aisle and you will see stars everywhere. 3.5, 4, or 4.5 stars. Plenty of factory-made sliced breads, including multigrain and sourdough style, score high health star ratings because they are low in saturated fat, contain some fibre, and are fortified with vitamins. But public health experts are now warning that the system is being exploited by companies making ultra-processed foods. A recent analysis highlighted that the star system focuses on nutrients like fat, sugar, fibre, protein and salt, and largely ignores the degree of processing and the presence of additives like emulsifiers and gums. They explicitly gave pre-sliced supermarket breads as an example. Many contain modified starches, vegetable gums, and emulsifiers, yet still score well on health stars, even though they fit the ultra-processed profile linked with long-term health risks. At the same time, a major Lancet series found that ultra-processed foods, which make up nearly half of the average Australian diet, are associated with a higher risk of type 2 diabetes, hypertension, heart disease, and other chronic conditions, based on over 100 cohort studies. Bread is not the only culprit in that mix, but when your main daily staple comes from wheat that has been industrially milled and mandatorily fortified, dough boosted with oils, gluten and emulsifiers, and supply chains that can stretch across the world and back, you're no longer eating anything like the flour, water and salt loaves older generations built their meals on. The pattern is clear. Tip Top, Wonder, Helga's, par-baked bakery loaves and other packaged breads are all variations on the same ultra-processed theme. So if supermarket bread has drifted this far from real food, what does good look like now? Now let us talk about the Australian bread options that are actually worth your time. You do not have to give up bread, you just have to stop pretending all bread is created equal. Here is how to get back as close as possible to what your grandparents ate while still shopping in Australia today. Step 1. Look for 3 to 5 ingredient loaves, flour, water, salt and culture. Old school bread, especially sourdough, is literally flour, water, salt, and a starter, which is just flour and water that has been fermented. So when you are in Coles, Woolworths, or at a local bakery, flip the label and count. If the main dough has more than 5 or 6 ingredients, especially numbers like 471, 472E, 481, 1413, and gums, you are in ultra-processed territory. If it is basically flour, water, salt, yeast or starter, and maybe a bit of oil and grains, you are much closer to real food. Step 2. Favor true sourdough from real bakeries. If the ingredient list on a sourdough is flour, water, salt, and sourdough culture, and that is it, you are in the right ballpark. Independent sourdough bakers in Australia are proud of this simplicity. They talk openly about long fermentation, no commercial yeast, and no improvers. Yes, it costs more per loaf, but it is actually bread in the traditional sense, not a bread-flavored product optimized for shelf life. If your budget allows, make one of your weekly loaves a true sourdough from a local bakery and use it for the meals you care about most, like breakfast or lunch. Step 3. When you do buy packaged bread, downgrade the processing and upgrade the grain. You might still need a cheaper sandwich loaf for the kids or for toast. Here is how to choose the least bad option in the aisle. Go for loaves with whole grain flour or visible grains high up the ingredients list, no emulsifiers if you can manage it, and minimal gums and modified starches. Some bakery chain loaves, like certain Baker's Delight grain breads, use wheat flour, water, grains and seeds, yeast, a bit of canola oil, salt and vitamins, without layering on emulsifiers and gums. Still industrial in some ways, but closer to food than the ultra-engineered supermarket white. You can also experiment with rye breads, dense wholemeal tins, and anything that feels like it would go stale and hard in a day or two. That is usually a sign real fermentation is doing the work, not chemicals. Step 4. Do not let the health star distract you from the process. When comparing breads, use health stars only as a rough check on sugar and fiber, then look straight at the ingredients, the additives, and the length of the list. If a 4-star loaf is full of emulsifiers and gums, and a 3-star dense whole grain from a local baker is just flour, water, salt, and seeds, you know which one looks more like something your great-grandparents would recognize. Step 5. Consider baking once a month, just to reset your standards. You do not have to become a full-time home baker, but making even one loaf of simple bread, using a basic recipe of flour, water, salt, and yeast or starter, will completely change how you look at supermarket slices. You will feel how dough behaves without improvers. You will see how fast it stales without additives. And suddenly, that soft for 8 days, bread will stop feeling normal and start feeling weird. Final message and call to action. Old-school Australian bread was not perfect, but it was recognizable food with short ingredients lists, local bakers, slow fermentation, and no emulsifiers, no gums, and no frozen global supply chains. Today, a huge chunk of what we call bread in Australia is ultra-processed plant foam built to stay squishy for a week, made from fortified industrial flour, canola oil, gluten and emulsifiers, punched up with fibre powders, starches and vitamins to win health stars, and when eaten as part of a high ultra-processed food diet linked by large studies to increased chronic disease risk over time. The loaf did not change overnight. It drifted. Slice by slice, we moved from real bread to bread-like product. You do not have to become perfect. But if this video made you look at that plastic bag loaf on your bench a little differently, pick one of your weekly breads, swap it for a shorter ingredient, slower fermented option, and start rebuilding your diet on food your body actually recognizes. If this helped you see the difference between old-school bread and supermarket imposters, tap like so, more Australians can protect their plate from ultra-processed staples. If you want more deep dives that shield your health and your family from the tricks of our modern food system, hit subscribe and turn on notifications. That is how we keep this series alive. Now tell me in the comments, which loaf in your kitchen took the biggest hit today? The kids' high-fiber white, the fake sourdough, or the so-called freshly baked stick from the big chains? And what is the first bread you're going to swap out this week?